May 26, 1999. Camp Nou, Barcelona, 90 minutes on the clock. Bayern Munich are 1-0 up. The Bayern ribbons have already been tied to the trophy. The UEFA president has already left his seat to congratulate the winners. It's over. It's done. And then, in the space of 102 seconds, the entire history of football changed. This is the story of the greatest 3 minutes ever played. Welcome back to Untold Football Stories, where we tell the tales that gave football its soul. If you're new here, hit subscribe and ring the bell. We drop a new legendary story every single week. Now, let's go back to Barcelona, to a warm May evening, to the night they invented Fergie time. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand what Manchester United were chasing. And they weren't just trying to win the Champions League. They were trying to do something that no English club had ever done before. Win the treble, the Premier League, the FA Cup, and the Champions League, all in one season. They'd already won the Premier League. On the final day, coming from behind against Tottenham, 4 days before the final, they'd beaten Newcastle 2-0 to win the FA Cup. 2 trophies in the bag, 1 to go, the biggest one of all. But fate had dealt them a cruel hand. Their captain, Roy Keane, the engine of the entire team, the man who had single-handedly dragged them past Juventus in the semi-final with one of the greatest individual performances in Champions League history, was suspended. So was Paul Scholes, their midfield brain. What the 2 most important players in the squad would be watching from the stands in their suits. And there was another layer to this story, a ghost story. May 26, 1999, the date of the final, would have been the 90th birthday of Sir Matt Busby, the legendary Manchester United manager who survived the Munich air disaster of 1958 that killed 8 of his young players. The man who rebuilt the club from the ashes and won the European Cup in 1968. Busby had died in 1994. 5 years later, his club was playing for the biggest prize in football. On his birthday, their opponents, Bayern Munich, 3-time European champions. A squad built on German steel and discipline, led by Lothar Matthäus, the most capped outfield player in international football history. Managed by Ottmar Hitzfeld, one of the sharpest tactical minds in the game. They had steamrolled through the knockout rounds, beating Kaiserslautern 6-0 on aggregate. The bookmakers couldn't split them. But without Keane and Scholes, most pundits tipped Bayern. Ferguson himself knew the danger. He reshuffled the team, pushing David Beckham into central midfield and playing Ryan Giggs on the right, a position he hated. 90,000 people packed into Camp Nou, the biggest club match in the world, and nobody, absolutely nobody, could have predicted what was about to happen. The game kicked off, and within 6 minutes, Bayern struck. Mario Basler, a chain-smoking, wisecracking German midfielder, stepped up to take a free kick on the edge of the United box. He rolled it under the wall. Peter Schmeichel, playing his very last game for Manchester United, couldn't get down in time. 1-0 Bayern. And for the next 84 minutes, that was the story. Bayern controlled the game. They were organized, disciplined, suffocating. Mehmet Scholl hit the post. Yanker hit the crossbar with a spectacular bicycle kick. United couldn't find a way through. Beckham was trying to create from the middle, but he was lost without Keane beside him. Giggs was invisible on the right. Andy Cole and Dwight York were starved of service. At halftime, Ferguson walked into the dressing room and found his players deflated. 1-0 down, missing their captain, missing their playmaker, playing in a stadium that wasn't theirs. He looked them in the eye and said something that Teddy Sheringham would never forget. "You've seen that trophy on the halfway line. If you lose tonight, you won't be able to touch it. You'll have to walk right past it. And you might never get this close again. So don't leave anything out there. No ifs, no buts. Give everything." The second half continued the same way. Bayern defending, United probing, the clock ticking. 70 minutes, 80 minutes, 85, nothing. And then Ferguson played his cards. On 67 minutes, Sheringham came on for Jesper Blomqvist. On 81 minutes, Solskjaer replaced Andy Cole. 2 super subs, 2 rolls of the dice, the last throw of a desperate man. It changed nothing, or so it seemed. With 90 minutes on the clock, Bayern Munich were celebrating, not on the pitch. They were too professional for that. But everywhere else, the party had started. UEFA President Lennart Johansson had already left his seat in the VIP area, and he was making his way down to the pitch to present the trophy to Bayern. On the way, he bumped into Sir Alex Ferguson and shook his hand. "I'm sorry," he told him. A commiseration, a goodbye. On the touchline, a UEFA official was tying Bayern Munich ribbons onto the handles of the Champions League trophy. Red and white ribbons, Bayern's colors. The engravers were preparing to add Bayern's name to the cup. David Beckham stood on the pitch and looked over at the trophy. He could see the ribbons. He knew what it meant. The fourth official held up the board. 3 minutes of added time. 3 minutes to save the treble. 3 minutes to save the dream. And this is where the legend begins. Now I need you to stop for a second and imagine this. You're a United fan in that stadium. You've spent £1,000 to fly to Barcelona. You've watched your team lose for 90 minutes. The ribbons are on the trophy. It's over. What would you do? Tell me in the comments. And if you're still here, smash that like button. Now let's finish this story. 90 minutes and 36 seconds. United win a corner. David Beckham trots over to take it. Now, here's what you need to understand. Peter Schmeichel, the goalkeeper playing his final game, had come up for the corner. A 6'4" Viking standing in the Bayern penalty area. It was an act of pure desperation, and it caused just enough chaos. Beckham swings the corner in. Schmeichel goes for it. He doesn't get it. The ball bounces around. It falls to Dwight York on the edge of the box. York scuffs a shot. It's half blocked. It drops to Sheringham, the substitute. The man who almost didn't make the squad, 6 yards out. He prods it into the net. 1-1. 91 minutes on the clock. Camp Nou erupts. The United end loses its mind. But here's the incredible thing. Bayern didn't just concede an equalizer. They had their souls ripped out. You could see it in their faces. Matthias had been substituted 10 minutes earlier. He was sitting on the bench in his tracksuit, watching the dream die. Sami Kufur, the Bayern defender, punched the ground in rage. The commentator, Clive Tildesley, screamed the words that would become immortal. "Name on the trophy." But it wasn't over, not even close. From the restart, Bayern kicked off in a daze. They gave the ball away. United surged forward again. Another corner. Beckham again. 92 minutes and 17 seconds on the clock. Beckham curls it in from the right. Sheringham, at the near post, flicks it on with his head. And there, at the far post, is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, the baby-faced assassin from Norway. The man who came off the bench in the 81st minute. He doesn't blast it. He doesn't head it. He sticks out his right foot and pokes it into the roof of the net. 2-1. United. Clive Tildesley lost his mind. Manchester United have reached the promised land. Solskjaer ripped off his shirt and sprinted to the corner flag. Schmeichel did a cartwheel on the halfway line. A 40-year-old man doing a cartwheel because he couldn't process what had just happened. Ferguson stood frozen on the touchline, mouth open, unable to speak. 102 seconds, 2 goals. From dead and buried to champions of Europe. From the ribbons on the trophy to the greatest comeback in football history. The scenes that followed were unlike anything Camp Nou had ever witnessed. United players lay on the pitch crying. Bayern players lay on the pitch crying. But for very different reasons. Sami Kufur, the Bayern defender, threw himself face first onto the turf and pounded the grass with his fists. He had to be carried away by teammates. Lothar Matthäus, who had been substituted just minutes before the collapse, sat on the bench staring into nothing. He would later call it the worst night of his career. On the other side, Teddy Sheringham and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, two substitutes, and two men who weren't even supposed to be on the pitch, had written their names into football immortality. The UEFA officials scrambled to untie the Bayern ribbons and replace them with Manchester United's red and white. The engraver crossed out one name and etched another. And then came the moment. Alex Ferguson, Sir Alex Ferguson, walked to the television cameras. He was asked what he felt. He paused. He shook his head. And he said three words that would define him, define the club, and define the sport itself. Football, bloody hell. That was it. That was all he could say. Because there were no other words. There are no other words. What happened in those 102 seconds was beyond language, beyond logic, beyond anything football had ever seen. But there's one more layer to this story. And it's the one that gives you chills. Remember, the final was played on May 26th, Sir Matt Busby's birthday, the man who built Manchester United from the rubble of Munich, the man who buried 8 of his players and started again, the man who won the European Cup in 1968 and said it was for the boys who died. 31 years later, on what would have been his 90th birthday, his club won it again, in the most impossible way imaginable. Roy Keane, watching from the stands in his suit, later said he felt nothing but emptiness. "I didn't play," he said. "I don't know why people don't understand that." The man who got them there couldn't be part of the ending. That's football. Beautiful, cruel, unforgettable. Peter Schmeichel lifted the trophy that night, the last act of his Manchester United career. He had told Ferguson months earlier that he was leaving, so his final act as a Manchester United player was to hold the Champions League trophy above his head at Camp Nou. You couldn't write it. Manchester United's 1999 treble remains the single greatest achievement in English football history. No English club has done it before. No English club has done it since. Those 102 seconds at Camp Nou didn't just win a football match. They created a myth. They created the concept of Fergie time, the belief that as long as Alex Ferguson was on the touchline, the game was never over. Ever. Teddy Sheringham and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will never buy a drink in Manchester again. David Beckham's corner will be replayed until the end of time. And somewhere, somehow, maybe Sir Matt Busby got the birthday present he always wanted. If this story gave you chills, wait until you hear the next one. It's darker, much darker. Subscribe now. I'll see you there.